Good morning, everybody. This is Walk the Dog Season 2, Episode 33, and I'm recording this Monday, March 3rd, March 2nd, at my lunch break. Hopefully everyone's doing okay. What do we have coming up? Coming up on Wednesday is the big patch, the regionals patch, the patch where we change all the unlock conditions, and we change everything, which is crazy. So we'll see how that goes. Definitely a little nervous. I'm trying to block out some time on Wednesday so I can get some live games in. That being said, I've also played a lot this patch. For whatever reason, I was at like 0 LP, literally 0 LP, and then I decided to like play some games and really try to understand this patch again. And I actually climbed I reached my new high, which I was at one point at 640 LP. I think I'm at 480 right now. So I've definitely played a lot of this patch. And, it's definitely, like I said, T-Hex is a giant eyesore that should have been B-patched, right? Like, that is absolutely true. But other than that, actually, it's a pretty healthy patch. And I think my surprise secret weapon has finally come online. Noxus is, actually really playable with LeBlanc. Draven's terrible, but the LeBlanc version is actually really good if you can get that going. And there's just been a lot of lines that you can make work. There's a bunch of Ionia. There's a bunch of stuff. But what I will say is, if you look at my record, I have a lot of thirds and fourths, and it's like, well, yeah, because you usually lose to the T-Hex 2 that hit, or the High Roller, or things like that. But yeah, definitely, like I said, definitely played a lot this patch, so I'm aware, and I pushed through the pain of T-Hex along with you guys. So beyond that. There was the Ninja Turtles pre-release this weekend. That was a lot of fun for me. I don't know. I enjoy drafting CCGs. I enjoyed the Riftbound draft I did with Froden. I enjoyed the Magic draft. Drafting's just a lot of fun. And, do I think a bunch of the Turtles cards are silly? Some, but there's some I really like. I actually managed to pull 2 of the pixel art ones that I think are really cool looking. So, yeah, overall, that was a lot of fun, though. Like I said, I went 3-0. That was pretty cool. Yeah, I think that's the majority of stuff going on. The other thing is I did some work this weekend on future land stuff and was very productive. So came in Monday with a bunch of documents ready to go of here's what we can do. And that's always feels good because just as you've solved some tough problems and helped improve things for future sets. So that always feels good. So yeah, generally a productive weekend. I think the only other thing crazy in my life right now is the new computer I got is crashing a bunch. I don't know quite why. The only thing I can tell is maybe one of the pieces of hardware is failing and causing the issue, so I'm working with the support crew to try to figure that out. But it's frustrating. I can't use my main computer right now because of that. So just been using my work computer most of the weekend. So it is what it is. Okay, cool. I brought in some good questions, including some good ones from last time that I didn't get to. So I want to answer those. And the first one I thought was a really good question, which is, what is the benchmark for a rework versus just balance changes? For example, why did Asol get a full rework and not Mel and Darius? And I really like this question because it's definitely one of those things that's pretty subjective and case by case. But I'm going to try to, on the fly here, develop a bit of a framework for you. And generally, the way I look at something is the first thing you should assume if you're on the live team is that you don't need to rework it. That is your starting point, right? Can you solve this with just numbers? So first, I identify the problem, right? So let's take Asol as the example. The problem identification here was, well, because of the way his stacking system works, you can only play him with Ginsu's Shojin blue buff, pure mana generation to get to the stacking. That was the only way to play him. So again, the first thing you should try with any champion is, can you fix this with numbers? And in Asol's case, is there any number you could change to make it not true that this was the way to stack? And the answer was no. There was no number that you could just swap out or just increase that would make it, now you want AP items, now you want Jeweled Gauntlet. Because literally the way it stacked was instances of damage. And so because of that, you feel like you have to do a rework. Now let's compare that to Mel. Mel, for example, is there a number where Mel is playable? And the answer to that is yes, right? Like you buff the sphere damage enough, right? Like, and again, I'm not suggesting we do this, but let's say, for example, you made her AoE half as good, like her final part of her spell, but you made the orbs do 20x damage, right? So like the orbs would be constantly doing a lot of damage, right? Like that champion would work. It'd be a different champion, but it would functionally work. And so there are numbers there that you can get to where Mel is good. And in fact, we'd seen it, right? On PBE, she was good, right? Or, and again, I'm going to exaggerate, but if the Radiant item was after 100 instead of 235, she'd be good, right? And so if there is a number where it will be good, you should try to avoid reworking it, mostly because of, resources, right? We can only spend so much time reworking things. So if you can avoid it, you need to, so that we can prioritize work on other things, such as future sets. Darius is the same thing, right? Like Darius, if that heal, instead of at 2-star being 400, was 700, or if his mana cost went from 0 out of 60 to 0 out of 40, right? He'd be quite good, right? He'd be totally fine. He'd probably be too strong, but like, yeah. And so that's where Darius and Mel both have numbers that can make them functional and successful. Now, the only other avenue is, let's say you do look at those numbers and you're like, cool, in order for me to get this functional, it would be an unhealthy play pattern, right? If there's a world where you have a champion, I'm trying to think of a good example in this set. There might not be a good example. I'm trying to think of someone with backline. Oh, Fizz. Let's use Fizz as an example. Let's say, for example, it's like, hey, Fizz was weak, but every time we buff him to the number that makes him functional, he's just an incredibly frustrating experience, right? So that would be then the problem statement is, when Fizz is strong, he's just not fun to face. And so again, are there numbers that would fix that problem? Well, no, because the problem statement is inherently built into the statement here, which is that when the numbers are good, he's frustrating, and when the numbers are bad, he's not frustrating, but he's bad, right? So like that would be an example where if that statement were true, then you would need to rework him, And so that's an example where we didn't get to that point. Thankfully, I think, although I will say playing on live, Fizz is really, really close again. I've definitely had some Fizz 2s with the right items, almost one-shot your Lux 2, on the first cast. It's close. So I think we're treading that line really, really closely. But that would be another example of where, again, if the number can't solve the original problem statement, then you need to consider a rework. And so if you're watching this and you can think of any champions that you feel like we should have reworked, ask yourself that question. Is there a number where that wouldn't be true? I think for pretty much every champion right now, the answer is no, right? Like Silas, I know, is another popular one that people aren't happy with right now. And again, is there a number where Silas could work? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You give that guy 300 more health, cut his mana cost by 10, dude's going to be a beast, So I don't think Silas needs a rework. But yeah, so that's the benchmark here. And hopefully that gives you a good framing so that if you ever ask us, why didn't you rework something in the future? That would be why, So, and again, one of the things about our process is we used to, if you think back to set 6 through 9, we ended up having to rework a lot. I actually think it was one of the flaws of our development process is we would get stuff out the door due to our time frames, but barely. And then we would look at something and go, wait a minute, this is really, really bad. And then we would try to fix it for a patch or two with numbers and then go, nope, it's not working. And then we would end up reworking it. And there's a lot. And so one of the things about our finalization process right now is that we try really hard to avoid putting ourselves in a situation where a rework might be necessary. I actually consider it sort of a problem if we're reworking after a set has launched, because that means we missed something in the development process, right? And so, Aurelion Sol is an example where yeah, man, we really should have caught that before we shipped. Now, can I use the excuse that it was our biggest set ever with 100 champions? Yeah, sure, but still doesn't mean we shouldn't have caught it, right? So I think that's the thing too, is you can look at us in kind of an accountability way here, which is, hey, in order for us to be really, really good here, anytime we do a rework, that means something went wrong, So that's the other reason why we generally tend to, reworks are expensive. Reworks require people who should be working on future sets to come back, do the implementation, possibly even get art involved if we do it wrong. Thankfully Aurelian Soul was one where it didn't really need art. But in the worst cases it can. So we really try to avoid those reworks. So cool. There you go. All right. Next question. This is another fun one. How do you feel Annie worked out? Would you recreate this unit in future sets? This is a tough one because you have to separate the balance from the design intent, okay? Because on the balance side of things, I think it'd be very easy to go, Annie didn't work out, right? She was only good for like a patch or two, then she wasn't good, and that was really frustrating, and no one's really excited to use Tibbers because he's not that tanky. But again, going back to the first question, which is, can you solve things with numbers? If Tibbers' shield was higher and the mana cost was lower, Tibbers would be a beast, and we've seen that. Likewise, if Annie cast 2 autos earlier, she'd be a beast, right? Like, that's buffable and fixable. So balance-wise, yeah, she's been weak for a while, but I don't actually look at that as the problem. I think the thing you have to analyze here fundamentally is, how do you feel about a 5 cost that gives you 2 bodies that share a trait? Because it's like a value 5 cost, right? And how do you feel about a spell that is not only a big boom, because like if you compare like, Ziggs and Annie, right? Ziggs throws that bomb, and when he throws that bomb after 200 mana, it goes boom. Annie, she has to get, I think it's 160 mana now, but big boom. But then once she does, the damage doesn't even happen, so you still have to survive even longer, right? Like that was the risk that we took with this spell, was like a big boom that you don't even get the boom. And generally what I say, has it worked out? Not really. I think if I were redoing it now, I would actually up her mana to like 200, which I know sounds crazy, but I would make, when that board fire happens, like everyone instantly takes like 50% of their health, just like, because that way it wouldn't instantly kill everybody. Because the problem is, if it's a flat number, like let's say it's just 1200 damage, what happens is none of the tanks die because they only take 400 damage due to DR and MR, but then all the backliners just explode, which is not a healthy paradigm. So what I would almost say is, like, that spell should have been 50% of their health is just instantly burned away, and then it ticks. That way you'd get that feeling of that initial burst, and you didn't have to like delay the fight so long. So that's how I would change Annie's part. As far as the Annie Tibbers thing, it's really tough. I think it's unique, and I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we tried it. Would I do it again? I think the answer is yes. I think the biggest problem was there was this weird reward thing where it was like 1 star meant you didn't have a strong enough Tibbers, so it wasn't worth putting on compared to like a 2-star Braum. But that also meant Annie 1 wasn't very good because you didn't have as good of a front line. But then once you had both 2-starred, assuming it balanced, it's like, oh, actually, they do a ton, and so there's something off there. I also think it was kind of lame that you like couldn't play just Tibbers if you really wanted to, which would have been nice for Arcanist builds, right? Like, there are times where it's like, if you had a Lux playable or even like an RE3, and it's like, man, I just need some more frontline to go with the Swain and the Nico, being able to throw in a Tibbers would be nice without having to have a itemless Annie that's doing nothing. Because that's the big thing for me, is I think itemless Annie's utility as a 5 cost is not good. One of the biggest successes of set 16 was the 5 costs like Shyvana and Fiddlesticks that, like, even if you don't have their traits, they're just like good to slot in. Annie didn't fit that bill as much as we were like, well, she gives 2 Arcanists, and it's like, well, yeah, except she really doesn't do much of anything, right? Whereas like Fiddle was like, man, you get that CC, you get that armor reduction. Itemless Fiddles feel good to put in. So I do think Annie could have used some more utility. Now, I know someone's going to be like, well, she does provide burn. Yeah, except not until 20 seconds into the fight. So not really, right? Like, if you had told me Annie had or maybe it requires Tibbers, but if you told me Tibbers had a passive that was just like literally has Sunfire built into him on him, okay, maybe, right? There could have been something there. I don't know, but the getting 2 champions thing I think was really unique. And if anything, I'd love to poke at that more in the future. Another thing here is maybe it shouldn't have cost 5 gold, right? Like maybe there was some budgeting power here that I think was incorrect. And it's like, well, actually, if Annie had cost 8 gold, then we could have been like, well, cool, what you're actually getting is 2 5 cost worth of value, and that makes sense. Or even the extreme version, which I don't agree with, but let's say I did, 10 gold, right? Where it's like, no, this is just, you're buying a bucket of 2 5 costs, and every time they show up in your shop, right? You want to get real fancy. Imagine, if you will, anytime Annie shows up in your shop, she took 2 shop slots and was blocking off, so you had to like buy them both and it cost 10 gold. Like that could work. So that's what I'm saying. I think there's iterations here that could do things that are pretty interesting. But again, if I gave it a passing grade, I'd be like B+. But again, that's separate from the balance. I want to be clear. Balance-wise, I think she ended up being too weak for too long. People have forgot about her. Arcanist builds don't really work. And I think, especially in like 16, 3, 4, and 5, and maybe even a little of 2, she's been mostly way too niche. So balance-wise, she'd get closer like a C-. But design-wise, I think she's closer to a B+. With, again, the big things missing being like utility so that you can play her itemless, and maybe some of the rules around like Tibbers and not Tibbers and things like that. But I don't know. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad it's one of those, if we're ever going to keep pushing TFT forward, we have to be really weird with our 5 costs. And this actually came up in the YouTube comments of the Monday morning meta report today, where people were like, yeah, I don't know, man, this unlock mechanic seems really hard to balance because you guys keep getting like T-Hex and ASOL wrong. And it's like, well, wait a minute. That has nothing to do with the unlock mechanic. If you take T-Hex and ASOL and replace them with generic 5 costs that do generic power, we could have done that easily. That's not a problem. But the problem is we try to make 5 costs that push the envelope and do really weird things, right? Like T-Hex, if T-Hex had just been a unit, would have been easy. Not with a channeled spell, but like a single, imagine the spell shoots a fireball into a group of people that goes boom, right? Like, no problem. Or if ASOL had not had the stacking mechanic, easy, right? He just summons a meteor, 80 mana, whatever, does damage. Cool. But we need to make new and novel 4 costs, or 5 costs, and those are always going to be the riskiest and hardest things to balance, is because, especially when they have those integrated systems, right? T-Hex had not only the Hexmex thing, where it was like, you got to eat the people and get a different stat based on that, but also the channeled spell, that was a balanced challenge. And then ASOL was the stacking, that was a challenge, specifically around when you can hit it, when you cannot hit it, things like that. So that was pretty tough. And so, like I said, I'm glad we did the unique 5 costs, but that is kind of the risk that comes with it. So, yeah. All right. The next question's actually kind of a personal one. But someone asked this. I don't know. It's a good topic to talk about. How do you deal/use/handle frustration? And this one is actually, it's a personal question to me, because the answer has been both the secret to my success, but also my biggest weakness. I am somebody that when I get frustrated, I don't hide it well at all. Like I am a very open and honest person, and that comes with pros and cons. And one of the cons, and this has been career affecting, is that, like, for example, if you come to me with a idea that I don't think works, and then I try to calmly explain that to you, and then you argue with me about it, I will get frustrated, and then I will speak, a little more hostile, or if I'm frustrated, like I said, or a good example actually is in playtests. If I decide to playtest something and then it's not functional, like it's just bugged, I get frustrated that, like, hey, why didn't we check this? Why is this in this state? And I get grumpy about it, which can affect morale. It can be pretty bad. So like I said, in that regards, it's actually a pretty big weakness. But at least the nice thing is teammates know what I'm thinking, right? There's no weird like, does Mort actually like this idea or not? Like, no. He's very clear about it. He's very open and transparent. But I'm getting a little off topic. The original question you asked was, how do you deal with frustration? One of the ways I handle it is that what happens is anytime I get like bad news or a bad call or something that like really hits my morale and causes frustration, is I'll go through about a 24-hour period where I'm just like angry. I'm very angry about it. I'm grumpy. I'm just like, I can't believe it. I like rant and rave. Usually I try to find a friend. This can be a coworker who I really trust or a close friend or even my wife sometimes, and just like, I'll rant. My engineering buddy at Nintendo, Dean, was always this for me. He and I would leave the campus, go to lunch somewhere, and just like rant for an hour, right? Yap about like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe we're doing this. This is so dumb, whatever. And it would allow me to vent those frustrations out and get them out of my system. And I do think that is very healthy. Now, like I said, you need to find a person that you can trust to do this, because obviously if you do this to the wrong person, it goes very poorly. But like I said, being able to vent that frustration is good. Then, and this is where the secret comes in, what I have found for me is that it becomes, my way of handling is I go, okay, I need to prove this person wrong and I need to prove my hypothesis correct. So I have two stories that can illustrate this. The first one was on Aura Climber, that game I always describe as the game no one's ever heard of that I worked on. I had made a level, the first level, and my boss, Mr. Abe, great guy, was like, hey, this level's, it's not quite enough. I was like, okay, well, what's wrong with it? He's like, well, it's just not quite enough. And he wasn't giving me a lot to work with. Like, okay. So I made some iterations to the level and I tried again. And I still got with like, oh, I don't know, man. It's just not very, there's not a lot going on here. It's kind of boring. It's just not good enough. And I got frustrated. I'm like, because you're not really telling me what to do here. I'm not getting good feedback. I'm very frustrated. I'm very angry. So I did my usual, like, go to lunch with Dean, grouch about it. Then I come back and I said, you know what? F this. I'm just going to make the best damn level. And so I had a couple mechanics that I was saving for future levels, because we knew the game was going to have 10 levels. And I was like, I can't blow all my mechanics in the first level. But I said, you know what? Screw it. And I just like put all the mechanics that I wanted to do in the first level. I had the player do a bunch of really cool things. There was a lot more variety. I'm just like, bam, here you go. Here's like the best level. And if this somehow isn't good enough, then I quit, because I've just given you God's gift to level design. And he played it and he was like, oh, damn, this is great. This is even better than I was thinking. This is great. Now, then he also followed up with, now do it 9 more times. And I was like, well, I just used all my tricks. But I surpassed it, And so I turned that frustration into a channeled, okay, like here. Second story, I love sharing this story. Anna Donlin, who is currently like the head of all Valorant studios. When I first worked at Riot, I worked with her on League of Legends. The team was called the Pi team, the skins team. And she was sort of like the head of all that area. And so I was like her lead designer in the space. And I can't even remember what project it was, but something pissed me off and got me frustrated. And I could not tell you what it was. And so I then went and finished the deck that I had been asked to do in like 3 hours. I just like pumped this thing out. Again, it was under this, I need to prove everyone wrong. I need to prove that I'm the best. I can do this. I was angry about it and I did it. And the quality was really good. And I'll never forget what Anna said that day. Anna said, Mort, you are incredibly effective when you are angry, and I don't know what to do with that information, because that is very dangerous information to have. And it was true, because that's just how I am as a person, is that when I get grumpy and angry and like I feel the need to like prove the haters wrong, and it probably has something to do with how I grew up in school and whatever, but that's just the way my mental works, is that I feel the need to go, oh, is that what you think? Well, let me show you that you're wrong. you know. Hilariously enough, there's a small part of like my weight loss that stems from that, where it's like people saying whatever, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll show you, right? Because I like to believe that there's nothing I can't do, and so yeah. So like I said, that's how I handle frustration. And even now, I can tell you like there is something that has happened recently in my life that has frustrated me, and so how am I handling it? The same way I'd always do, which is, okay, fine, I'll show you. I'll show you that that's not true and I can do that, you know? So that's just how I operate. So, and again, I'm not going to say that works for everybody, but it's what's worked for me and it has led to some very good results in my career. Not perfect though, because again, the fact that I don't hide my frustration can be a big weakness. So, yeah, there you go. All right, I got one more question. I don't know what the time's at. I feel like I've been yapping a while. Also, my Slack's going off like crazy. People trying to talk to me during lunch. 25 minutes. I probably shouldn't take this last question. Yeah, this question's a little too long. Oh, man. Oh, well. Okay, well, like I said, this has been episode 33. I should get back to work. Yeah, you'll probably hear from me again, hopefully Thursday or Friday, because I'm definitely going to want to talk after I play a few games on the live patch to see how it goes. Because again, it feels like we're making the hard trade-off here, which is I do think it will make the set better and more flexible and more interesting, but the change of version cost is going to be massive. How many people are going to be hurt by the change of version cost? How many people are going to be enjoyed by the thing that, like, does it actually make the set better? And then, of course, there's the competitive aspect, which is if you're a competitive player who doesn't like change 3 days before regionals or 2 days before regionals, you're going to be grumpy about it, right? So, like, the timing definitely could have been better. So we'll have to see. But I'll be curious to see how it plays out. So, all right, there you go. Happy Monday. Hopefully you guys are having a great time. And yeah, that's going to do it for me. All right, until next time, take it easy.